Testing, 1, 2, testing, testing, 1, 2. Okay.
Good morning, colleagues of the NAA'BIK'IYATI committee. I believe we do have quorum here within the chambers. Colleagues, we do have a regular NAA'BIK'IYATI committee meeting today, July 13, and we do have an opposed agenda. Once you enter into the council chambers, please press your roll call button. Committee members and also for our viewers, just for clarification again, we are back in in-person only standing rules again. So if you're here within the chambers, colleagues, feel free to press your roll call button. And colleagues, this for an announcement, we do have the AC down right now, so there's no ventilation right now, just due to a short powered outage about an hour ago. So we do have facilities and maintenance on their way to help us start the AC unit. So just be with us and just patiently. Colleagues, we do have 15 present here within the council chambers. That does constitute a quorum. We'll call the meeting to order at 10:11 a.m. Thank you, colleagues, for making it to our in-person committee meeting. Kodo Shiaj, Delegate Yanito, if you could help us with the invocation this morning.
Hakoshi o kodo ahia lang kodo 25th council adon the summer session kojala shen nije shin so thadatin dan tinto dal thon dan tinje hol ji do ishin pat o le in lego hot ani do kon thadatin hen das lindo ahia o den sa ni chul yagi to aron the kodo shin yawda di nil to da nil chilo shin la det det så den sidan halnya då det då på då så det sen be has sig då det det är ju då det när sans ma det är ju ändå är allt ni då halt en go då det ändå nanse det är ju trat ja det är ju trat kon go kon hassan vi koni vi hinla då ja det över ändå hade näsa adonche ja det är ju nog hijin dal så kom be hot en nas in go be ol tahto ho jonge ke ho tkharatin bina hot lehiyat e hon jono kolch nazla be holjish aro kushin skanda e hon so da zindat e do ho nahaga don tlazdat e hon khanna da chi hon jonon galcha holla be ke hot e do leh adon da kwa ngina hat as bagan sa ani khone o yugo e ndat on adon den le large satani president Bu Niger and whole auto vice president on the staff that's what administration auto koje kwagi atani len year 25th council atlan seats in nikodo yelin da has ade kode jono go in khata ision ne lo ko ni de na jo pa nen gi bin nas yat yo ni da has ando le jo ibn ya al koje ho to ni helon jo de hayol khatlebe khat ade ben sa case jono go e khone belki kato yad o belki iznelte o nas beta da nit at le ni da do ntsle ho nahat also khanes de hitne do an hildan lasel ne to jos belakana bezaj in ibn nat elto ako de neosan ilna yani ayos khalna ot lijna suja hil khalal ne salke khode yad o ni ka dil wo lo don ka nacha ناسب يا هو تيدو له بنيه هو كأجي نادال سوكودي جيان الخاص إنانس هو يا تيهون جنا يكون بي ناس نانيت إيدو له هو بنانيل أندو له بنيه أدون دهون دي نلوي هو بيدخل زل زال خوجة نيتوه داز ليجن هون كوندا تلتزين زنشكش ناز لاجن يا تيهو جون دو له خدو دال سو خدي إسان دو خدي إنكيسان هون نديل نشجي زال administration anazn de injunu go eko behlel nishol de min yenash kodeyot ahjon do de tlas in yode tlas change zal so in hin la kon be da hazin do eko benil nishol de lonjuno benach khaltslo da hadil nilcho ibn ye kodon khata isyon ibn nash ya kode hjon do de lodishne tol tashin ko be yaj kon تو هم دازلین یاد یالچه تا دیل نیلو یاد یو بگیره تا دیل یلو یاد یو نانش یاج که وینی یاجین سونی چینی چو هم بهلت زی بکنه نیت اینو لیتو دایی من یه کویگی هلنا نیت لدو آدون هات آد لینی کونن سه کیس نهات آد اینا هسه هسنی یاد یو جون بنا هلزلو لیت آدونن تلاوت آنها اینسنو لیت کده یاشل خاص یا ستاشین هنده بزده هجون دی هدی یاد ایون جنا این ستا ازلا ایکونه به یو ان به جنا گو ای به نهایت ادول هیجیل تیدو به الجیل تیدو به هیز نیلز آن دل دای هیجن دیل نشده سوده ده هدی دی دای به اینچ هجون دل کو اگه خد دین ده است لیتو دال سوده یاد یو ای به الزلا کون هیل نو دل شد خد دینش کیل انیت ای دا هجون دل ناش کون خد دين اللي يكون يا تيهو بهالت اللي يكواجي كويشين سكاندا ايدي كوانا هات ابي بيدا اشلش ادون دا يكون يدا اشلش ينجات خالدان لين تو هيو يكون دا دي دون خال حزلين دون ابان دا حزيل اندو يات يون يلتا نو ودون ناش داي جونغو ايا الهندي كاتو ناس انجنو اي كاتو لين يدن is aid alla nazni don le alchin ya do ichinde do ichini ado de nessa adon da assas sani ado has tu di chain yinal yecho also ekodo e bits is ya eto le so ibn ya adon da e altrat e ishin wal aid also ni ya hot eto le to ko ishi patnan da has anigo zalt khoje e نيجي يكون بنسي كيسو با نويد أحبيا دوت إيو خلص الجد Gilangst ando lehbini yati ebe. So NAA'BIK hajun achadit ebe so the zin kuda e njinna ando le sa NAA'BIK hajun da netlon de shin. Od ego edi kejin tsijin yajin kide inade dal so de me hinchi hajun asli dole. Hajun asli.
Ichehat Shiash, Kodo Delegate Unito, Kodunjanago, so there's in Kapa, Nakain Lado, Ichehat. And good morning again, colleagues. It's good to see all of you here within the council chambers. We're going down to number 2, recognizing guests and visiting officials. Be 2-minute limit. That Shiaj, Delegate Daniels.
Thank you very much. Yeah, good morning, Madam Chair, Madam Speaker. Honorable Yanito, thank you for the prayer. That so does the Hain Ziki Ishit the needs and all that each nada a skydo which at this time I'd like to recognize some individuals in the gallery here. They're sitting on the west side, southwest side over here. Is it southwest? Representatives, staff from Utah State University, Mr. Jim Dandy, and there's two other staff. Yeah, thank you for coming. Yeah, Arunana Blending Campus. Aruna, there's a center in Manama Valley. I just want to recognize all my 4 chapters. The 4 chapters that I represent, Nazis on Uljeto Shanto and Tsapikin chapters. Chapter staff, chapter officials, chapter staff, and Lenigi Habitat, but Schnedo Lentodo, Arokodonana, Nareta His Agos, Astuido Sani, the Haz Trago, Edo Schnedo Benelni, or Let's Sodas on bed. I see that as do it look at Kodo, Nihajun Stu, I see here she is Nigo, I got Kodashi Beba, the house Yankodo, Dino Sagi, the His Ago, here elders and Lenigi. Grandparents, so thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Delegate Daniels, and welcome to our guests in the gallery. Welcome to our capital of the Navajo Nation. Recognizing guests and officials. Okay, we'll keep moving. Delegate Nez.
Speaker. I just would like to request through you, your office speaker, to contact KTNN and other radio stations to tell the public to drive very careful with these trail riders. There's people that are riding in, leaders, delegates, and families, and all of them. So just let the public know to be careful. Thank you.
Delegate Nez, this as an announcement, colleagues. I know many of us will be starting our trail rides either later on today or in the morning and then throughout the weekend. So if you're taking a Pacific route, just please forward that to us so we can have a proper escort and also those warning signs for traffic. And we can work on that PSA with the radio stations. Delegate Nez. Delegate Toll.
Madam Speaker, do konat anin senigi. Need a box ni agit Mr. Damon gets out to Anyway, just want to say good morning to all of you, and also again we're back in person meeting. ban kilta hojo to teleconference iban deni kagonda yo hodat endishi koro he nan hich ni don shinat ani no lendi do nada hilsa do hilnada dil sto he do shi chapter benashni do lil 8 chapter baka kasmerli little water white horse bentara torion do oho do counselor NAA'BIK'IYATI. So all the staff official those tuiro sani don hisalat so benalni edilto ibati nenleko. So all the staff kuroton here legislative staff executive staff do judicial do bandegi nan his staff nenegi bata holiashi do lito kon jadistunde Ahot in the 8 citizen EBA hot in Lenko ishin the Babatsan little little. What on he has Zidolil do Kidahan Ashin Colch Yananil Kidolil. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Goshin here hatche delegate toth do kuna inana shade Chair Jesus.
Yat'ayapina, Madam Speaker, and Yat'ayapina to colleagues of the 25th Navajo Nation Council. And also I'd like to wish good morning to our staff under legislative branch, to the legislative services team, and also to the guest in the gallery, and then also again to, I don't know if we have any listeners on the call, but again, it's good to see my colleagues. But I just wanted to put a reminder out there, and maybe this is something as leaders we can share with our constituents back home, especially for communities that are situated in a forest or tree line area. I know that BIA has been sending alerts in regards to our forests out there, that due to the dryness that we need to have our constituents be vigilant to be mindful when they have campfires out there and to drown their campfires. So ashon the kodon linigi hik chapter or planning meetings at Babel. And then also I just want to commend the Tsehotso Medical Center team, the team from the health promotion to the wellness center there, and to the other departments that work with clients in regards to wellness. I know that yesterday we were at a JMI event at Oak Springs chapter, and it turned out very well. And it was really great to see my honorable colleague, Speaker Seth Damon, out there. And he actually beat me on the 3-mile course yesterday. So Seth, it was awesome having you out there yesterday evening. And it's just a reiteration of wellness to our constituents in the greater part of the Navajo Nation, because we always have to remember, you know, we have to take care of ourselves first before we go and take care of other people. So having to try to eat right along with getting
Thank you, Chair, for that recognition and also announcement. Colleagues, I don't see anybody in the request to speak for recognizing guests and officials. Second call. Third call. We're moving down with our agenda. We are on number 3, review and adopt the agenda. Staff, Ms. Cook, could you help us read our proposed agenda into the record?
Good morning, delegates and participating audience. This is the NAA'BIK'IYATI Committee of the Navajo Nation Council agenda. This is a regular meeting held in Winter Rock, Navajo Nation. Today's date is Thursday, July 13, 2023, 10 o'clock a.m. Presiding Chair, Honorable Krista Lynn Curley, Speaker, 25th Navajo Nation Council. 1, call meeting to order, roll call, invocation. 2, recognize guests and visiting officials. 3, review and adopt the agenda. 4, review and adopt the journals. There is one dated June 22nd, 2023. 5, receiving reports. Report A, update on Operation Rainbow Bridge report provided by Thomas Cody, Executive Director, NNDSS, and Ethel Branch, Attorney General, NNDOJ. B, update on New Mexico capital outlay and TIF projects report provided by Calvin Castillo, Division Director, NNDCD, and James Atakai, Deputy Director and NNDCD staff. Report C, report from Department of Agriculture regarding stipends report provided by W.M. Mike Colonna, Division Director, DNR, and Leo Watchman, Agricultural Manager and NNDNR staff. 6, old business, there is none. 7, new business. A, legislation 0137-23. B, legislation 0138-23. C, legislation 140-23. D, legislation 148-23. E, legislation 0149-23. And F, legislation 0150-23. 8, close of meeting, announcements and adjournment. Madam Speaker.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Cook, for reading our agenda into the record. Colleagues, is there a motion? Motion by Vice Chair Johnson. Second by Delegate Unito. Delegate Daniels?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the motioning parties on adopting the agenda, I'd like to make an amendment to add on legislation 0146-23. Madam Chair, that would be my motion amendment.
Delegate Daniels, we do have a motion on the floor to add 0146-23. Ms. Cook, could you help us read that title into the record?
Legislation 0146-23, an action relating to the Budget and Finance, the Health, Education, and Human Services Committee, the NAA'BIK'IYATI Committees, and the Navajo Nation Council, approving $2,500,000 from the Sihasin Fund to Utah State University for a new education building in Monument Valley, approving the related expenditure plan. Sponsor is Honorable Herman M. Daniels, Jr. Co-sponsor is Honorable Ricky Nez. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, staff. Do we have a second? We have a second by Delegate Toth. Next, we have on to amendment number 1, questions and comments. We have Delegate Toth to the amendment number 1.
Madam Speaker, I just wanted to add an item on under report will be D. This is in regards to activities going to happen. Spring session Tuesday to Wednesday go. I'd like to have Division of Health, Ms. Morse and Ms. I believe Russell will give a brief report what's going to happen on that day, Tuesday night or Wednesday morning. So pertaining to Elderly's Day, just a minor report, inform our leaders that on that date or least. I think they're on the calls. Hinge kid or least is not. What Madam Speaker?
Kodosha Delegate Toth, we do have a motion and a second already for amendment number 1. Would you just like to request that to the motioning party to amendment number 1 to add that? Chiche, just for clarification.
Okay, be motion party shindo bidishkis. Aisha add dotlis. Ashonde. Thank you.
Motioning party, Shiaj, Delegate Daniels.
Madam Chair, I concur. Thank you.
We do have concurrence from the motioning party. And just help us, we'll put that on the board here. And we'll double check with you if that verbiage is right, Chiche. Delegate Toth, once it gets on the board. Goshi, we have Chair James to amendment number 1.
Speaker, Kodo Shanahuin Agi, Shana, the Honorable Daniels, Doshna Ash, Honorable Toth, Kodon Hidish Kilti that legislation 0141 -23 Aja Eya E Latoshabido Sos and so Eya E Kodo Hijana Idish Katako, what are Eba Hastito Lihat Speaker.
Chair James, there's a request to add on legislation 0141-23 and just request. I'll have Ms. Cook read that title into the record, so then we can make that. I'll go back to the motion party to Ms. Cook.
Legislation 0141-23, an action relating to the Resource and Development, Budget and Finance, and NAA'BIK'IYATI committees and to the Navajo Nation Council. Amending Resolution Number CF-05-23 to remove the funds reversion deadline for the Ganado Fire District Emergency Vehicle Expenditure Plan. Sponsor is Honorable Vince R. James. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. I will go back to the motioning party of amendment number 1 for that request for modification. Shiyaj, Delegate Daniels.
Abiga. Thank you.
Do we have a concurrence by Delegate Toth?
Totas Janito Lis Abiga, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Goshen, we do have another added legislation. Next, we have Delegate Dr. Andy Nez.
Shadow Speaker, Otto Kodoshilna Ash, Delegate Daniels, Otto Shiyat, Delegate Toth. Shadow adding legislation 0130-23 to today's NAA'BIK'IYATI committee. That's my request. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Nez. Staff, could you help us read that legislation title into the record? That is legislation 0130-23.
Legislation 0130-23, an action relating to the Resource and Development, Budget and Finance, and NAA'BIK'IYATI committees and to the Navajo Nation Council. Approving $5 million from the Sihasin Fund to Navajo EPA for the assessment and remediation of environmental damage from former lumber processing operations at the Red Lake and Sawmill chapters. Approving the related expenditure plan. Sponsor is Honorable Andy Nez. Madam Speaker.
Motioning party to amendment number 1. There's that recommendation for modification. Concurs, second, and concurs. Next, we have Chainana, Delegate Toth. Chair James.
Nana dan Speaker Kodoshana Huntagi Kodo Shana Doshna Ash Kodo Belke no Ajiki did Nate that's it on staff that's in his Kodone the Haidiki day not suspected now did I not suspect okay legislation Ziki the highlight aya a Kodo Abohone Zani a Alco aya a Hatati Leniki. If you can provide us the legislation's numbers that are ready for NAA'BIK'IYATI that have gone through the standing committee, quite to the motioning party. I think I think we're missing legislation 0134 -23, and then also legislation 0130-23. Ako, A88, I think those are the other ones that we are missing as well. Ako, there's probably others legislations that are already out there. Ako ko kodo binan hidil kito lik ako kodo motioning party ke na ajigi dobe na okan linigi baby agenda dit atlashin naka ide do zohn le ako under amendment 1 ako hot iba hastito letan speaker akaha.
Yeah, Chair Vince James, staff, I'll give you the floor to see which legislations are ready for NAA'BIK'IYATI committee today. And I'll turn it back to Chair James if you can concur with that, and then we can turn it back to the motion party. Ms. Cook?
Good morning, delegates. In addition to the legislations that are listed on the proposed agenda, as well as the amendments that were made by the delegates, we do have the following two legislations that are ready for NAA'BIK'IYATI committee. Legislation 0134-23, and this is an action relating to Health, Education, and Human Services Committee, Budget and Finance, NAA'BIK'IYATI Committee, and Navajo Nation Council, extending the CF07-11 designation of savings from personal accounts as restricted carryover funds to be used for administering and maintaining the classifications and pay plans, extending the CF07-11 moratorium on budget revisions and/or reallocations using savings from the general fund personnel savings, establishing the personnel savings fund. Sponsor is Honorable Seth Damon. The second legislation is legislation 0147-23, an act relating to the Law and Order Committee, NAA'BIK'IYATI committees, and the Navajo Nation Council, amending Title II of the Navajo Nation Code to codify virtual attendance by council delegates at standing committee meetings and Navajo Nation Council sessions. Sponsor is Honorable Amber Knazba Crotty, and co-sponsor is Honorable Otto So. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Kudo, Shiyaj, Chair Vince James, if you concur with those two legislations, then we can turn the floor back to the motion party. Chair James?
Yeah, Nanadan Speaker. What edo let o kodo ye khazigi staff igishin kodo ye ken ajib ya ina o kan dani bejen dit atako edo ido zofini ako da iba nana stito let yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair James. We did have Ms. Cook read those legislation titles into the record, so we'll just leave that and we'll turn the floor over to our motion party for amendment number 1. Shiyaj, Delegate Daniels, there is a request for modification.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I concur. Thank you.
You have concurrence from the second party. Thank you. We do have those legislation here up on the board. Colleagues, are there any comments or questions to amendment number 1? We have Delegate Yanito.
Yanana tehia o kodo asanani tlenigi kodo keso zenisi yedo seche motion party deeded on this legislation 0140, 0148, 0149, 0159-3 a consent agenda that nilto. Let's put those legislation in front, so let's get the process moving while we are having all these meetings. kodo beta nish do le even ya ats kilo en hinch kido le kwa lan so zingi
So we do have a request on the floor to have a consent agenda for new business letters C, D, E, and F. I'll turn it back to our motioning party for amendment number 1. Delegate Daniels.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah. Kudo shitla asya hatzigi kudo to do consent agenda on 3 legislations. Is asatit a separate motion, or can it be included in this amendment 1?
Hakoshi, thank you, Delegate Daniels. What we can do is put it as amendment number 2 if you do wish to avoid any further confusions, if that's an easier way. But I'll leave that decision to the motioning party. Delegate Daniels.
Okay, let's do this one here first. I don't know, the second amendment, we can do the consent agenda. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Hakoshi, there is that recommendation. Kudo Shiaj Delegate Unito to motion that as amendment number 2 after we finish this one. Hakoshi, are there any other additional additions or deletions? We are still on amendment number 1. Second call. Third call. Let's go down to a vote. Since we're back in person, there is a timer back on the voting button for 2 minutes. So just feel free to touch your buttons to vote. Thank you. We have 20 seconds left on the board. Uh, 5 seconds to vote on amendment number 1. Thank you, colleagues. We do have a vote of 17 in favor and 0 opposed on amendment number 1. Colleagues, we are back on our main motion on our agenda. We do have a motion by Vice Chair Johnson, second by Delegate Unito. Chache, this is back to our main motion to the agenda. Delegate Toll, and then we'll move forward with Chair Eugenio Charles Newton.
Madam Speaker, just a report from them, so thank you.
Next in queue, we do have, we'll have Chair Charles Newton.
Thank you, Speaker, and good morning, colleagues. It's good to see everyone back in chambers today. Speaker, I would like to make a motion to hear all of the legislations first. In the past, we have experienced where we've run out of time and the legislations, don't move forward. So because we are starting Monday with Summer Council, I'd like to move the legislations before the report so that we can make sure that they're added onto summer session agenda. Thank you, Speaker. That's my motion.
We have a second by Speaker Damon. This amendment number 2 is to move new business items before reports. Colleagues, do we have any questions or comments? We have Shiaj, Delegate Unito.
And these item on C to F on legislative with the fiscal recovery. ADE larger that these, let's get those things out of the way. So, the process, let it go through the process, and then let's get it approved, and let's get that expenditure going. To consent agenda that those items. Yeah.
Shiaj, Delegate Unito, we do have a current motion on the floor to do reports towards the end of the agenda and having new business items go first. There was a recommendation from myself that we do the consent agenda as a separate motion, but since there's that request again on the floor, I'll turn it over to our motioning party first. Chair Charles Newton.
Thank you, Speaker. So I'm fine with that. Were the legislations for consent agenda, were they identified?
So let's go, we're updating the board, but in the meantime, we'll have Ms. Cook read those titles into the record for that request, for that modification for consent agenda for C, D, E, and F.
Items for the consent agenda. Item C, legislation 0140-23. An action relating to the NAA'BIK'IYATI Committee and Navajo Nation Council, amending CMY-41-23, the Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Fund Delegate Region Project Plan for Honorable Lamardo Asaret's Delegate Region. Chapters include Klagatoh, Wide Ruins, Hauk, Lupton, Nahat Azil, to include additional projects for this delegate region. Sponsor, Honorable Lamardo Assaret. The second legislation is Legislation 0148-23, an action relating to the NAA'BIK'IYATI Committee and Navajo Nation Council, amending CAP-19-23 and CD-68-22, the Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Fund Delegate Region Project Plan for Honorable Andy Nez, PhD's Delegate Region. Chapters include Crystal, Fort Defiance, Red Lake, Sawmill, to include additional projects for this delegate region. Sponsor is Honorable Andy Nez. The third legislation is Legislation 0149-23, an action relating to the NAA'BIK'IYATI Committee and Navajo Nation Council, amending CD-69-22 and the Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Fund Delegate Region Project Plan for Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie Delegate Region. Chapters include Dalcon, Indian Wells, Tisto, White Cone, and Greasewood Springs. Sponsor is Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie. The last legislation is Legislation 0150-23, an action relating to the NAA'BIK'IYATI Committee and Navajo Nation Council, approving the Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Fund Delegate Region Project Plan for Honorable George H. Tolth's Delegate Region. Chapters include Little Water, Pueblo Pintado, Torreon, White Horse Lake, Baca Pruitt, Casimiro Lake, Ojo Encino, and Counselor. The sponsor is Honorable George H. Toth. Co-sponsor is Honorable Seth Damon. Those are the four legislations that will be listed under the consent agenda. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, staff, for reading those titles into the record for that recommendation for consent agenda. Well, at this time, we'll turn the floor back over to Chair Charles Newton.
Thank you, Speaker. With all of the items added to the consent agenda, Speaker, can I ask, have you asked the sponsors if there are any amendments that need to be made to any of the legislations?
Thank you, Chair Charles Newton. Colleagues, if you're a sponsor of any of these ARPA legislations, if there's no objections. First, we do have comments here by Chair James.
Here, Speaker, Ado Kodo Shinale Nosa, Belke no Honorable Newton and then Honorable Damon. Kodo need a legislation the question is like that and a bedasit zosalinko. A the dot a kodo hinge kato it does it dot a kodo consent agenda a Bido Netlako legislation 0146-23 do 0141-23 0134-23 0130-23 0147-23 Akot adas a kodo alkadi lo the legislation the bido need the bella sit legi do bedasit zo gi kodo big out need lo ke das zo gi kod a ba hanana stito na okhan the nation nalid atla na ando leko kodo yelke na aji kodole Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair James. There's a request to add additional items to the consent agenda. Just give us a few minutes to put that on the board. Thank you, staff. We do have that updated here on the board. There's that recommendation from Chair James to add 0130-23, 0134-23, 0141-23, and 0146-23, and 0137-23 to consent agenda. I'll give the floor back to our motioning party here for amendment number 2. Chair Charles Newton.
Thank you, Speaker, and Delegate Yanito and also Delegate James. Speaker, I think that this should be a separate amendment. So the amendment was to move all legislations to be heard before reports. I think that if we can move the legislations to be heard first before reports, that the consent agenda is a separate action. Because we're adding on more legislations, this amendment could fail because somebody doesn't want a legislation on the consent agenda. So, Speaker, respectfully at this time, I'd like to ask the Delegate Yanito and Delegate James if they could raise Amendment 3 to do the consent agenda. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Charles Newton, there's that recommendation. There's no declining the request for modification to include the consent agenda. So amendment number 2 will just be moving new business items before reports. And there's that recommendation to do the consent agenda as amendment number 3. Thank you, colleagues. Are there any other comments or questions to amendment number 2? Second call. Third call. Call for a vote for amendment number 2. Colleagues, just a reminder again for us in the chambers, it will allow you 2 minutes to vote on your roll to call button. Delegate Crotty? Time expired on the board. We have Speaker Damon. Chair Parrish. Vice Chair Simonson. And Chair James. Vice Chair Johnson? Right, locking down votes. We do have a vote of 18 in favor and 0 opposed for amendment number 2. Colleagues, we are back on the main motion of our agenda. We have Vice Chair Slater.
Morning, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. I'd like to motion to do a consent agenda for legislation 13723, legislation 13823, legislation 14023, legislation 14823, legislation 14923, legislation 15023, legislation 14623, 14123, and 13423. For 130 and 147, I would ask if anyone requests to remove those from the consent agenda. A little spicy. Oh, yeah, allergies. No. Which one is this?
This is my regional, but just add it to the record.
Thank you, Vice Chair Slater. And just give us a few moments to put all those legislations here on the board.
I mean, I can't motion two things in one motion, but you could request to modify. I mean, you could request to modify.
Oh, you just don't want to?
No, I'm saying you can only have like one motion.
No, you modify it.
I mean, if you request all of this, I'll consent to it.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think she'll let me make those two at once
To do a consent and then add.
and add in one motion. I'm happy to do it. I'm not sure. Yeah. It's,
Thank you, Vice Chair. We do have legislations 137-23, 0138-23, 0140-23, 0148-23, 0149-23, 0150-23, 0146-23, 0141-23, and 0134-23. Do we have a second? We have a second by Delegate Yanito. Colleagues, do we have any questions or comments or objections to amendment number 3? We have Chair James, and then we'll go next to Chair Parrish. Chair James?
Go ahead. No, I was going to do this amendment, so I'm okay. Thank you.
We have Chair Parrish.
Good morning, colleagues, and thank you, Speaker, for allowing me to talk for a second. I believe there's an amendment, a small amendment to legislation 13823, so I'm going to request that be taken off just for that reason. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. There is one deletion from the consent agenda, that is 0138-23. We have next Speaker Damon.
Thank you very much. On legislation 0137-23, I'm requesting that to be taken off because there is an amendment needed, and that is that legislation is final authorities here at NAA'BIK'IYATI Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker Damon. There's a deletion on 0137-23. Are there any other questions, colleagues, on the proposed consent agenda? We have Delegate Azret.
Good morning. Thank you, Speaker Curley, do Guayna, so Kai Council delegates here, do citizen in line, Mr. Yanito here, all iso big legislation 14. Can you see my one? Thank you. 14023. I would like to get that removed. I have amendments that I need to make on that also. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Azret. We do have deletion from consent agenda, legislation 0140-23. Colleagues, are there any other additional comments or questions on amendment number 3? Second call. Third call. We're going to vote for amendment number 3. We have 1 more minute on the board to vote. Thank you, colleagues. We believe we do have all the votes. We have 19 in favor and 0 opposed on amendment number 3. Colleagues, we are back on the main motion to adopt our agenda. Are there any other comments, questions, deletions, additions? Second call. We have Chair Charles Newton.
Speaker, at this time, I'd like to request that we take a 5-minute recess to allow staff to put together the agenda so we know what we're voting on, and then we come back to vote on the agenda. Is that something that we can do?
Colleagues, there is a question. If there's any other objections, we'll allow staff 10 minutes to prepare our agenda and make those copies. Okay. Okay. I believe we do have 1 more amendment to add. That's fine. We'll keep going forward. Next we have, but after we do adopt all the amendments, we can take a 10-minute recess for the staff to put that agenda together. We have Delegate Crotty.
Thank you, Shadeja Chair Curley. Colleagues, I'd just like to add legislation 0145-23. This is my delegate region proposal. I'm not sure why it wasn't added onto the agenda, so maybe we could talk to staff about that mishap. And I would also want to add 0147-23. This would be amending Title II to allow for virtual attendance for delegates at committee and council sessions. Thank you. Oh, it's already added? Who added it? Amendment 1? Oh, okay. If that was already added, I'll strike that from my recommendation. Just to be added onto the agenda. Thank you, thank you, Chair James, for adding.
Thank you, Delegate Crotty. There is one addition to the agenda. This is amendment number 4, is legislation 0145-23. Staff, could you help us read that legislation title to the record?
Legislation number 0145-23, an action relating to the NAA'BIK'IYATI Committee and Navajo Nation Council, amending CD-67-22, the Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Fund Delegate Region Project Plan for Honorable Amber Knazba Crotty's Delegate Region. Chapters include Cove, Totaline, Two Gray Hills, Red Valley, Cheap Springs, I'm sorry, I'm gonna mess this up. Sanasti. Baklabato, Gadetwade, to include additional projects for this delegate region. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, staff. We do have a motion on the floor for amendment number 4. Is there a second? Second by Vice Chair Slater. Colleagues, are there any questions or comments to amendment number 4? Second call. Third call. Going to vote on amendment number 4. Go to the drawing board. Uh, 50 seconds to vote. I believe we gathered all the votes here in the chambers. Colleagues, we do have a vote of 19 in favor and 0 opposed for amendment number 4. Thank you, colleagues. We are back on the main motion to adopt our agenda. This is to the main motion. Are there any other deletions or additions? Second call. Third call. We'll go for a vote to adopt our agenda. This is on the main motion, colleagues. Will be 2 minutes on the board to vote. Oh, before we do that, we do need a second reading.
Amendment number 1 is to add legislation 0146-23, 0141-23, 0130-23, and 0134-23, and 0147-23. Add a report regarding Elderly Day during Day 3 of the Navajo Nation Summer Session. Report from Kim Russell, NDOH Executive Director, and Michelle Morris, NDOH Legislative Analyst. Amendment 2 is to move new business, item 7, before reports, item 5. Amendment 3 is to add legislation 0148, 0149-23, 0150-23, 0146-23, 0141-23, and 0134-23 to the consent agenda. Amendment 4 is to add legislation 0145-23. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, staff, for that second reading of our agenda. Colleagues, we're going back to the drawing board. Be allowed 2 minutes on the board to vote. Point of order raised by Chair James.
Speaker, I raise this point of order because you stated, well, let me start off that my knowledge, Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton made a request to take a recess before we vote on the main motion, and then you stated that we'll go into a 10 minutes recess before we vote on the main motion. So are we no longer going to take a recess after this voting takes place that is currently in progress, Speaker?
Thank you, Chair James. I kind of got my timelines mixed up. That is correct. Colleagues, I know we're in the middle of a vote. I did say we'll get that listing together within 10 minutes. Thank you, colleagues. We did have about approximately 1 minute still on the voting board. Just a corrections. If there's any other objections, we can resume voting after we get the whole agenda copy. And then we can resume vote after the staff sends that out. We need about 10 minutes to do that. I don't see any other objections. Colleagues, call to recess for approximately 10 minutes, and we can pick up the vote back within the remaining time of that 1 minute. Recess at 11:22 a.m., and we'll resume back at 11:33 a.m. Colleagues, just give us a few more minutes. We're about to do the final review of our agenda before it's sent out by email. Thank you, colleagues, for your patience. We do have a final draft of our agenda, which was emailed to you just a few seconds ago. So you should be able to see that through your email, and we'll have staff do the prints as well. At this time, we'll go back for a roll call vote so we can exit out of recess. So if you're here within the council chambers, please feel free to press your roll call button. Colleagues, we are back in a roll call. Colleagues, we are in the middle of doing a roll call for attendance. This is to exit back out of recess. The agenda was sent out, colleagues. It should be in your email. Staff, we do have in the chambers, we have Vice Chair Johnson, we have Delegate Yanito present, we have Delegate Azarette here, and we also have Speaker Damon here in the chambers. Colleagues, we do have a presence of 20 council delegates back in the chambers. We'll exit out of recess at 11:48 a.m. Colleagues, you do have your new agenda, proposed agenda within your email. As we recalled, we'll be redoing the vote to adopt our agenda. We'll give it a few minutes for our staff to pass out the printouts for our agenda, and then we can proceed to vote. Thank you, staff. I believe you have a copy of our proposed agenda and also through email. Colleagues, we can go back to the drawing board. We did have a second reading of our agenda, and we did go into recess for a few minutes to allow staff to put our agenda together. So we do have the final copy here. So we did have that 1 minute expire, but what we'll do is we'll go down the line with a roll call vote, and staff will help us, and just state your green or red vote. This is to adopt our agenda for today, colleagues. Staff?
Honorable Stephen Arvizo, how do you vote? Honorable Stephen Arvizo. Honorable Stephen Arvizo is not present. Honorable Amardo Astaret voted green. Honorable Helena Inez-Begay, how do you vote? Honorable Helena Inez-Begay votes green. Honorable Norman Begay, how do you vote? Honorable Norman Begay. Honorable Norman Begay is not present. Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton, how do you vote? Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton voted green. Honorable Shauna Ann Claus excused. Honorable Amber Canes-Bacrati voted green. Madam Chair, Crystal Curley is not voting. Honorable Seth Damon, Herman Daniels, and Vince James voted green. Honorable Brenda Jesus, how do you vote? Honorable Brenda Jesus votes green. Honorable Casey Johnson, how do you vote? Honorable Casey Johnson votes green. Honorable Dr. Andy Nez, how do you vote? Honorable Dr. Andy Nez votes green. Honorable Rick Nez, Honorable Nathan Nota, Honorable Jermaine Simonson, Carl Slater, George Tolf, Otto So, Curtis Inito, and Sherilyn Yazzie all vote green. Honorable Shandine Parrish, how do you vote? Honorable Shandine Parrish votes green. And for the record, Honorable Danny Simpson and Shauna Ann Claw are excused. With that, Madam Chair, you have 19 delegates who voted in favor and 0 delegates who oppose.
Thank you, staff and colleagues. We do have a vote of 19 in favor and 0 opposed. We do have an adopted agenda. Going down the line, we have 4 review and adopted journals. We have one journal, June 22nd, 2023. Staff did email that out on July 5th. At 9:10 a.m. and again on July 11th, 2023 at 10:57 a.m. Colleagues, do we have a motion? We have a motion by Delegate Tolf. Do we have a second? Second by Chair Parrish. Colleagues and folks in the gallery, just a reminder to silence your phones during committee meetings. I think we do have a duck quack in the chambers. Are there any questions or comments to the journal? Second call. Third call. We're going to the drawing board for a vote to adopt our journal. We have 45 seconds on the board. All right, thank you, colleagues. I believe we did get all the votes here within the chambers. We have a vote of 20 in favor and 0 opposed, and chair not voting. Colleagues, we do have item number 5, new business. We do have a consent agenda. Just for the record, colleagues, we did put reports towards the end of our agenda today. And just a reminder for our presenters who may be here with us in the chambers or online, it's highly recommended that you be here within the chambers with us in person during reports, just for that announcement. Colleagues, we're going down to number 5, new business, consent agenda. Staff, could you help us read the consent agenda into the record?
Consent agenda. Legislation 0148-23. An action relating to the NAA'BIK'IYATI Committee and Navajo Nation Council, amending CAP-19-23 and CD-68-22. The Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Fund Delegate Region Project Plan for Honorable Andy Nez, PhD's Delegate Region. Chapters include Crystal, Fort Defiance, Red Lake, Sawmill, to include additional projects for this delegate region. Sponsor is Honorable Andy Nez. This legislation moves forward to Navajo Nation Council as final authority, and at that time, the legislation will be read in its entirety per Standing Council Rules of Order 9 by electronic voice recording. Legislation 0149-23, an action relating to the NAA'BIK'IYATI Committee and Navajo Nation Council, amending CD-69-22 and the Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Fund Delegate Region Project Plan for Honorable Sherilyn Yazie's Delegate Region. Chapters include Dalcon, Indian Wells, Tisto, White Cone, Greasewood Springs. Sponsor is Honorable Sherilyn Yazie. This legislation moves forward to Navajo Nation Council as final authority, and at that time, the legislation will be read into the record by electronic voice recording per Navajo Nation Council Rules of Order 9. Legislation 0150-23, an action relating to the NAA'BIK'IYATI Committee and Navajo Nation Council, approving the Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Fund Delegate Region Project Plan for Honorable George H. Toth Delegate Region. Chapters include Little Water, Pueblo Pintado, Torreon, White Horse Lake, Baca Pruitt, Casimiro Lake, Ojo Encino, and Counselor. Sponsor is Honorable George H. Toth. Co-sponsor is Honorable Seth Damon. This legislation moves forward to Navajo Nation Council as final authority, and at that time, the legislation will be read in its entirety by electronic voice recording per Navajo Nation Council Rules of Order Number 9. Legislation 0146-23, an action relating to the Budget and Finance, the Health, Education, and Human Services Committee, the NAA'BIK'IYATI Committee, and Navajo Nation Council, approving $2,500,000 from the Sihasin Fund to Utah State University for a new education building in Monument Valley, approving the related expenditure plan. Sponsor, Honorable Herman M. Daniels, Jr., co-sponsor, Honorable Ricky Nez. This legislation moves forward to Navajo Nation Council as final authority, and at that time, this legislation will be read by electronic voice recording in its entirety per Navajo Nation Council Rules of Order Number 9. Legislation 0141-23, an action relating to resource and development, budget, finance, and NAA'BIK'IYATI committees and to the Navajo Nation Council, amending resolution number CF-05-23 to remove the funds reversion deadline for the Ganado Fire District Emergency Vehicle Expenditure Plan. Sponsors, Honorable Vince R. James. This legislation moves forward to Navajo Nation Council as final authority, and at that time, this legislation will be read into the record by electronic voice recording per Navajo Nation Council Rules of Order 9. Legislation 0134-23, An action relating to the Health, Education, and Human Services Committee, Budget and Finance Committee, NAA'BIK'IYATI Committees, and Navajo Nation Council. Extending the CF-07-11 designation of savings from personnel accounts as restricted carryover funds to be used for administering and maintaining the classification and pay plans. Extending the CF-07-11 moratorium on budget revisions and/or reallocations using savings from the general fund personnel savings, establishing the personnel savings fund. Sponsor is Honorable Seth Damon. This legislation moves forward to Navajo Nation Council as final authority, and at that time, this legislation will be read into the record in its entirety by electronic voice recording per Navajo Nation Council Standing Rules of Order Number 9. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, staff, for reading those legislations to the record. We do have a motion by Chair James, second by Delegate Toth. Colleagues, we don't have any debate on the consent agenda, so we'll go forward with a vote. Going back to John Board for 2 minutes to vote. One minute on the board. We have 30 seconds to vote. Thank you, colleagues. We do have all the votes. We have 20 in favor, 0 opposed, with chair not voting. Some of the majority of these legislations will move on to Navajo Nation Council. Colleagues, we are down to new business B, legislation 0137-23. We do have the sponsor here with us. Staff, could you help us read legislation 0137-23 into the record?
Legislation 0137-23, an action relating to the NAA'BIK'IYATI Committee, approving and adopting the legislative priorities of the Navajo Nation relating to the state of New Mexico. Sponsor is Honorable Seth Damon. NAA'BIK'IYATI Committee is final authority. This legislation has been read into the record by electronic voice recording per Navajo Nation per Navajo Nation Standing Rules of Order Number 9. Madam Speaker.
Thank you. We have a motion by Delegate Toth. Is there a second? Second by Chair Parrish. Colleagues, I believe the sponsor did mention that there was an amendment for this legislation, so I'll go forward with a presentation by our sponsor. Speaker Damon.
Thank you very much. Good morning, colleagues, members of the 25th Navajo Nation Council NAA'BIK'IYATI Committee, and good afternoon to Madam Speaker, to the staff, to our one individual in the gala. Amber, good morning. Good morning to everyone. Oh, you know what? This is the first time I've seen this chamber packed in here like this in a very long time. So congratulations, colleagues. I mean, we're moving out of this COVID. I was just talking to staff this morning, and when I was sitting up there in that chair for the longest time, it used to be just me and the staff here all the time. Madam Chair, we here, Otto Soap be here, we would sit here till 11, 12 at nights, and most of the time all alone through COVID, through 3 years of that. And we all, every time I looked and I gave the opportunity to speak, I always still looked at the seats, but there was no one there. And I just want to say thank you, everyone, for showing up here today. It's great to see everyone. We don't see each other a lot, you know, and it's good to see everybody. And I greatly hope that you all are doing good out there. Remember to eat. Remember to take some time for yourself. But today, I'm bringing a legislation, enough of me on my high horse. Well, actually, I'll be on my high horse on Saturday, you know, riding in, just like some of you will be riding through the trail ride. And I know some of you have started. I know Honorable Chairman Nez starts almost a month in advance coming over the mountain. And I know that we've seen great video footage of that. And going off of that, Chairman Nez in leading the aspects of the trail ride from New Mexico. That's what we're going to be discussing here in this legislation, 0137-23. This legislations are the New Mexico priorities, and historically these priorities are done every year for each one of the states. If you remember, Honorable Herman Daniels back at the beginning of this session, or actually of this year, put together the Utah priorities, and the reason why he did that with an immediate push was because he needed to send something to the state of Utah there back in January and February. Our New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah priorities are put together again every year, just because they change, they fluctuate, and in this case we have this legislation, and it's an updated legislation. This came derivatively from the New Mexico caucus meeting to select individuals to be on the New Mexico as representatives to the state task force. And upon that, we've really elevated that discussion to really say, okay, well, what do we need to do from the state of New Mexico? So New Mexico delegates came together with our representative too that represents on both sides, well, actually two individuals, Dr. Andy Nez and Madam Chair Crotty, who have chapters too as well on the Arizona side. We came together to discuss some of the priorities that we do have that are in place. A couple of the different discussions that we have was really trying to identify some of the needs and some of the biggest elements that we need to focus in on with the state of New Mexico. Again, these are the priorities that are with the state of New Mexico. This isn't really at the federal level, but more as just with the state of New Mexico. And you'll see in here in the exhibit A, we do have capital outlay as the number one, as we do receive capital outlay from New Mexico and tribal infrastructure funds. Number two is public safety. Number three is healthcare and public health. Number four is community development and housing. Number five is natural resources. Number seven, social services. Number 8 is education. Number 9 is economic development. And number 10 is protecting existing statuses of future legislations. The goal of this was really try to identify what needs to be put together. We did have a couple of, well, actually one big meeting with the state of New Mexico and putting those priorities together. That happened over almost 3 weeks ago. And in that was the discussion to really put forth some of the big initiatives. As we know, meeting with New Mexico, one of our biggest topics is understanding and still trying to focus in on the capital outlay for the state. with the state, trying to update the process, not only on the Navajo side, but on the New Mexico side. Also really trying to state that public safety was a huge priority, just like all our initiatives are priorities that we have coming from the Navajo Nation. But we really know that there's a lot of different things that we come from, and different elements that you all bring to the table, that you are represented here, not only from your constituents, but represents of your chapter officials, of your Club C members, all the worker bees that help assist to make sure that the priorities are here at a level in order for us to go ahead and work together. Also, that mirrors the representation that we do have working together with the executive branch, whether that be from the ASC, from Division of Community Development, Public Safety, EPA, just to name a couple of different individuals. You'll see that a lot of these, a lot of them were carried over from the previous legislation, and I know that Honorable Nota had some clarification that he probably is going to discuss, and I'll go ahead and clarify some of that if that is brought up to bring to the table. But on the number one thing that we did was that I know that this was kind of rushed to put this into a resolution due to the fact that we were trying to get this completed, and we did ask for a special session back on June 29th, a special NAA'BIK'IYATI committee meeting to have a special meeting here to approve the priorities, but unfortunately we couldn't get a quorum that day. And what we're trying to do right now is really trying to focus in on meeting some of these deadlines. Tomorrow, the New Mexico IAD department, which is New Mexico Indian Affairs Department, is meeting with Calvin Castillo and his team on a recon on a lot of the different projects there at Fire Rock Casino at the conference room. And that came from a directive from the New Mexico delegates, and really trying to restart that recon process that we had throughout the years. And that's formulated to discuss some of these capital outlay projects. But you'll see that the reason why I'm more in depth on that is because when we were talking and putting this together, there was still some things that needed to be clarified. And I do have asked of an amendment on the clarification for further instructions. And some of the bigger task instructions are like the 5%, recognizing our own sovereignty on some of the line items that we needed to be improved, specifically by stepping through the 164 process that I honestly don't think that we need to do every single time an intergovernmental agreement is put through the process. So I have asked Madam Chair Charles Newton to put that forth, and a further recommendation to put that capital outlay on infrastructure. I know that just for specifics on item number 5, under page 3 of 5, under the Exhibit A, Mr. Honorable Nathan Nota might make an amendment to as well to, I think if you look under there, number 5B is wrong. This is not, this is a typographic, this is something that we are not asking of, and I think that we are asking, Mr. Nota is going to ask for an amendment. Develop a radiation repository near the Navajo Nation lands or the Navajo Nation lands. The goal is that to develop a radiation repository away from the Navajo Nation, not near the Navajo Nation. So that needs to be taken, and it's coming into fruition right now as New Mexico's planning, working with the state and also with the federal EPA to relocate a lot of the uranium waste that's been created there in Honorable Stephen Arvizo's area in the Church Rock site. That's going to be relocated, and not only that, but there's, I think, 6 or 8 more sites across the whole Navajo Nation that they're looking forward to taking uranium across the Navajo Nation to different areas of focus or different locations. So I think that needs to be an amendment. The discussions with the tribe discussions on the hydrogen hub, which is 5C, that was more on the carryover. There was no discussion to take that off at the New Mexico update caucus meeting, but if Mr. Nota, if you want to take that off, you're more than welcome to raise that discussion. The next one on there was the New Mexico 5F, New Mexico Energy Act. The reason why that was specifically on there, and I think the clarification can be added, is that that Navajo be more directly apprised of those state meetings and more of a tribal consultation on the New Mexico Energy Act. And then 5G, this is the reason why that this one was carried over, is just because there was no discussion to take this off. But if that's something to take off on the San Juan generating station, one of the main reasons why that was left in there from previous years was just because of the reclamation process that needed to be sought out in order for those the generating station to be cleaned up once the closure was completely taken out and into consideration. But if there's any further amendments, again, like I've always said, this legislation is not my legislation. This legislation belongs to the NAA'BIK'IYATI committee, and the NAA'BIK'IYATI committee is able to make any suggested amendments. So again, I know that there was an urgency to get this done so we could take this to the tribal leaders meeting that was completed last week on the 5th and the 6th. But again, if there's further clarification that needs to be made, I leave it up to this committee to make it even better. Specifically the representation, and not only the representation from New Mexico, but representation from my colleagues from Arizona and from Utah too as well. So opening to this different discussion, I know that there is one amendment that is ready to go, but if there's any further recommendations or amendments, I haven't heard anything from Ms. Barbroff. I asked her earlier. I did have a discussion with Mr. Nota, but other than that, I leave it up to the committee. And again, if there needs to be further in-depth clarification, I'm willing to go ahead and make sure that that happens. And if that needs to happen, if we need to clarify that, I think, and if we need to have further discussion, that's something that that would be even make this improve this document even better. And whatever the direction of the committee would like to go, I am all ears. Other than that, I'll go ahead and yield to the floor at this time. But again, thank you very much, colleagues, for being here this day, and thank you for hearing me jabber on about legislation 0137-23. Yeah.
Thank you, Delegate Damon, for your presentation on the legislation. We'll go to comments and questions or any amendments. First, we have Chair Eugenia Charles Newton.
Thank you, Speaker Damon, for the legislation and really for bringing us together to talk about the priorities and what we want to do, and also hosting the meeting that allowed us to talk about the capital outlay and the TIF money coming into our chapters. I think that was very informative meeting. It was at that meeting that we were able to discuss some of the priorities that you have listed here on your legislation, and for that I want to say thank you, Speaker Damon, for taking the bull by the horn here and for pushing this priority through. So at this time, Speaker, I do have an amendment. Speaker Curley, thank you for recognizing me, and colleagues, it is great to see everybody back in chambers. I do have an amendment, and that amendment was sent out to the 25th Navajo Nation Council, I believe at 12:05 p.m. It's a 0137-23 amendment, and it looks like it was sent out. I'm not sure who sent it out, but we did get a copy. So that's my motion for an amendment, Speaker.
Thank you, Chair Charles Newton. We do have a motion on the floor for amendment number 1, and we'll turn the floor over to staff to read that amendment into the record.
Amendment number 1 to legislation 0137-23. A, revise page 1 of Exhibit A as follows. 1, capital outlay and infrastructure. Strike through A, renegotiate the 5% for tribal infrastructure fund and capital outlay. B, strike through state to provide training to chapters and elected officials related to the 5% language in statute required for compliance for capital outlay funds. Capital outlay education to enhance the level of transparency to ensure that chapters understand the process advocacy, and details needed to submit a potential successful application. C, strike through, obtain training on capital outlay and tribal infrastructure fund, TIF, process to chapters and elected officials. Strike through D, consider grants through the state in providing funds on behalf of the Navajo Nation. Strike through E, feasibility study on trajectory of capital outlay funding due to discussion of closures that may have an effect towards funding. Strike through F, New Mexico capital outlay funds, renegotiate state tribal infrastructure policy, secure funding for Navajo chapters and Navajo government programs, concerns on heavy reliance on gas, oil taxes, concern with reversions, New Mexico Joint Powers Agreement, relook at this and how it delays projects at the chapter level. Strike through G, general obligations, budget bonds, GOB projects, H, severance tax bonds, STB projects. Strike through I, infrastructure capital improvement plan, ICIP projects. Strike through J, transportation projects. A, underline new language, remove or extend the 5% obligation requirement. New Mexico's current policy requires the nation to obligate 5% of the appropriated amount within 6 months of acceptance of the Intergovernmental Grant Agreement, IGA, due to the nature of the nation's governmental structure requiring 5% of funds to be obligated within 6 months of acceptance of the IGA creates unnecessary hardship for Navajo Nation programs implementing the funding. Therefore, it is a priority of the nation to have the 6 months deadline removed or extended in future funding agreements. New language B, underline, have the state recognize delegation of signing authority by the Navajo Nation President. New Mexico currently requires the Navajo Nation President to be the signatory on all IGAs. This practice is not mirror in the state, which only requires the Secretary of Indian Affairs to sign the IGAs. Requiring the Navajo Nation President to be the signatory on all IGAs forces the nation to place every IGA through its internal administrative review process. This significantly slows down the execution of the IGAs by the nation. Therefore, it is a priority of the nation that New Mexico recognize a signatory delegation from the Navajo Nation President to the Director of the Division of Community Development. New language C, underline, require quarterly coordination meetings between the nation and New Mexico. In the past, the Navajo Nation and the state held quarterly meetings with appropriate stakeholders to go over pending projects. These meetings allowed the nation and the state to receive an update on pending projects, share pertinent information, and provide relevant trainings. These meetings have not been consistently held since COVID. Without these meetings, the nation has seen a rise in level of misinformation and miscommunication between the nation and the state. Therefore, it is a priority of the nation to have regularly scheduled quarterly meetings between itself and the state on pending projects. New language D, underline, more communication between the nation and New Mexico prior to the allocation of funds. The way the New Mexico funding process is currently structured results in New Mexico improving a lot of underfunded and non-feasible projects. This creates a stress on the nation, who is tasked with being the fiscal agent for projects that do not have enough funding to complete or not actually feasible. It is a waste of the nation's limited resources to work on these projects, since there is no guarantee the projects will be fully funded or completed. It has also come to the nation's attention that the state may purposefully underfunding projects with the expectation the nation will provide matching fund. However, there is no communication from the state on its expectations or reasons for underfunding projects, or whether the proposed projects are actually feasible. This results in the approval of projects that are not able to be completed within the state's timeline. The nation believes that more communication between New Mexico and the nation prior to the allocation of funds will result in more projects being funded that can be fully completed. Therefore, it is the priority of the nation to engage in more conversations with the state on proposed projects prior to the allocation of funding. New language E, underline, more joint trainings between the nation and the state in order to combat misinformation and confusion among the Navajo community on New Mexico-funded projects. It is a priority of the nation to conduct more joint trainings and informational sessions with New Mexico to ensure that the same message is being presented by both governments to the local community. B, renumber or re-letter succeeding paragraphs, sections, and exhibits as necessary and appropriate. The Office of Legislative Service and the Office of Legislative Counsel are authorized to make technical edits to this legislation and its exhibits to implement the Navajo Nation Council's intent. This amendment supersedes inconsistent language in any other amendments, which language shall be conformed to this amendment. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, staff, for reading Amendment Number 1 into the record. Second, we have a second by Delegate Dr. Andy Nez. Colleagues, are there any questions or comments to Amendment Number 1? First, I do see Delegate Nota.
I would like to see some changes to item number 5. Would that be a different amendment, or could we add it to this amendment? I actually don't have anything written up related to this. Just got verbal information, and that's what I have. Adding nothing, just removing, and maybe a bit of clarification.
All right, thank you, Delegate Nota, for that questions. I'll refer over to Ms. Barbara from our legal counsel to make that clarification for you.
Good morning, NAA'BIK'IYATI Committee. So as I'm following it, the simple response is we can add your amendment to this amendment. That's not difficult to do, or we can do it as a separate amendment. This is what I've tracked so far, that you would like a amendment to on page 3 under section 5, which is natural resources, number B. Right now it states develop radiation repository near the Navajo Nation lands or on Navajo Nation lands. I am guessing, I am presuming what you would actually like it to read is oppose any radiation depository near the Navajo Nation lands or on Navajo Nation lands. So the amendment would just switch that out. If I'm not correct, let me know. That is good? Okay. The next one, and I do have a question, and that would be a same page, still under section 5, natural resources. If you go down to San Juan Generating Station, that's G,